Kia ora and welcome back to the HRPI. I'm Marie Tovio, Employment Relations Consultant, Private Investigator, and your guide to navigating New Zealand's trickier workplace situations. Today's case file is the inconsistent outcome case, when similar situations are treated differently and why that can create real risk for employers. This episode is relevant to New Zealand workplaces and HR practice, and it's about something that can arise after a process has already been followed. Because here's the key point: you can run a technically sound process, assess the evidence carefully, and still end up with a problematic outcome if it's not consistent with how similar situations have been handled. Under the Employment Relations Act 2000, the expectation is that employers act as a fair and reasonable employer could in all the circumstances, and consistency is an important part of that. You might be wondering how consistency can become an issue when employment matters are generally confidential. While employers and employees should generally treat employment processes and outcomes as confidential, that doesn't mean information will always remain so. Information may be disclosed inappropriately, or previous decisions may become relevant if a later employment decision is challenged. That's why employers should always be able to explain why one outcome differed from another. But, and this is where nuance matters, consistency does not mean identical outcomes. It means fair, explainable outcomes. So let's unpack that. Two situations might look similar on the surface, but still justify different outcomes. For example, different roles or levels of responsibility, different employment history or prior warnings, different levels of impact on the business, or different surrounding circumstances. These differences can matter. But if you reach different outcomes, you must be able to explain clearly why. That's where many employers get caught out. Let's walk through a practical example. Two employees are repeatedly late to work. Employee A receives a formal written warning. Employee B receives informal feedback only. On the surface, those situations look the same. If there's no clear explanation for the difference, that might create risk. Now let's add some context. Employee A has previously been spoken to about attendance and has not improved. Employee B has no prior issues and has raised personal circumstances that have affected their punctuality on this occasion. Now the different outcomes may be justified, but the key is that the employer must be able to demonstrate what was considered, what was different, and why the outcome was appropriate in each case. Without that, the decision can appear inconsistent, even if it wasn't intended to be. Another common situation is where an employer deals with similar misconduct differently across teams or over time. For example, one employee receives a final warning for inappropriate behaviour. Another employee in a similar situation months later is dismissed. If the earlier decision is not taken into account or the difference isn't explainable, the later decision may be challenged as unfair. This often happens where records are incomplete, managers are making decisions independently, or there is no clear framework for potential seriousness or outcomes. So, what does a good approach look like? First, be aware of past decisions. Before confirming an outcome, ask, how have we handled similar situations before? Second, identify any relevant differences. Are these factors that justify a different outcome? If so, be clear about what you've taken into account in this case. Third, apply a structured and consistent approach. This is where policies, guidelines, and appropriate support are critical. And fourth, document your reasoning. Because if the decision is challenged, the question will likely be, why was this outcome different? And your answer needs to be clear and evidence-based. There are also some common pitfalls to watch for. One is assuming that consistency means treating everyone exactly the same without considering context. Another is the opposite, allowing too much discretion, which leads to inconsistent outcomes. And another is failing to keep adequate records of previous decisions, making it difficult to assess consistency at all. So, the key takeaways from today's case file are: consistency supports fairness, but context still matters. Different outcomes can be justified, but must be explainable. Past decisions are relevant and should be considered, and clear documentation is essential. If you're seeing differences in how issues are handled across your organisation, that's often a sign that managers need more support, training, or clearer guidance. I regularly work with organisations to align policies, support decision making, and build consistency across teams, which ultimately reduces risk and improves fairness. The information in this podcast is provided as general overview of key employment topics and does not replace tailored advice. Every situation is different and the appropriate steps can vary depending on the specific circumstances. If you're unsure about how to proceed in your workplace, I encourage you to seek advice and support. Feel free to get in touch with me directly. Same situation, different result. Sometimes that's justified. But if you can't explain it, that's where the real issue begins. Mā te wā.